Hello, and welcome to Team 2638 Rebel Robotics FRC CAD tutorial. In this tutorial series, we're going to be covering the use of Autodesk Inventor 2020 in the context of FRC Robotics. In this lesson in particular, we're going to be going over the Autodesk Inventor 2020 UI, creating a simple part, and saving that part. So when you open up Autodesk Inventor, you'll end up on this page, and this is your home page. From here you can create different files or access different files, such as parts, assemblies, or drawings. To access existing files, you would use the Open button, which lets you scroll through your computer to find existing files. To create a new file, you would use either this area over here to create a new file, or use this button over here. So I said that there are different files in Autodesk Inventor, and you can see some of them here. A part is a 2D or 3D object that you can create in the program. When you put those parts together in one file, you get an assembly, which is a combination of those 2D and 3D objects. A drawing is just a document where you can place 2D illustrations of your parts or assemblies and annotate them, whether it be with text labels or dimension labels. And a presentation is just a fancy way of displaying your assembly. And you'll notice that under Part and Assembly and Drawing, there are two different options. For the purposes of our tutorials, we're going to be avoiding sheet metal, weldment, and standard.idw, and we're just going to be using standard.ipt, standard.iam, and standard.dwg. So if we go from here and select standard.ipt, then you'll notice that we get brought to this page. I'm going to point out some important parts of the Inventor UI. In the uppermost menu bar, we have the ribbon, where you have different options such as creating a new file, opening a file, saving a file, undo, redo, and some other buttons that will go into more depth in later tutorials. Below that, we also have a File button, and from here you can create a new file, open a file, save a file, and do much more. Next to the orange File button, we have the 3D Model and Sketch tabs, which open up the different tools you can use to create 3D and 2D models. To the right of those, we have other tabs that have more tools that you can use in your parts file. Down below, we have the Model Browser, which is an outline that includes all the features of our file. And finally, down here, we have the File tab bar. And you'll notice that there are different tabs we can click through to access different pages. When you're working on different files in Autodesk Inventor, more of these tabs will show up and you can use them to click through multiple files.
So before you begin working on your part or assembly or any other file, it's always a good idea to save it. So if you're participating in our CAD summer program, or you're just learning CAD at any other time of the year, then you're going to want to save the part in our server. So in order to do that, just click the little save icon on the top left right here, and then a window pops up asking you where you want to save your file. So just click this down arrow, and then you should see this little folder that says gnsrobotics.com. Click that, and then this window opens up. So for the summer people, just double click this CAD Shenanigans folder, go to the folder that says Summer People, and then find your name. So if I was Andrew, I would double click that and then save my part in assignment number 1. So I could just rename this something like Introduction, and then click Save. So if you're lucky, it will just save and it won't give you this error, but for a lot of people, you might get this error the first time ever saving something to the server. So if you do, just click OK, click Save again, and just save it anywhere else on your computer. So I'll just save it to my desktop for right now. So I'll call this Introduction, click Save. Now that should be on your desktop. So then after that, you can just move it into the server. So just close Inventor, open up your File Explorer, go to your desktop, and find that part that you just saved. So introduction.ipt, click copy, go back to the server. So I'll just use Andrew as an example again. So assignment number 1, and then paste. Now you can probably just double click and open directly from the server. And once this opens, if you make any changes to it, it should be able to save right back in there. So just to make a change so I can make sure it saves, I'm just going to do something really quickly. You'll learn this in a few minutes, but just going to make a sketch here really quickly. And now if I click save, it's loading, and then if you refresh it, 9:09 a.m., 9:09 a.m. Now you'll see it will also create a folder called old versions, and a file called lockfile.lck. Leave those two there, do not delete them, because that will cause problems with Inventor. Just make sure you don't put anything in this old versions folder, and don't get rid of this lock file thing. But after you first save a part into the server, if you make a new part, and then try and save it on the server as well, it should work that time. It's just sometimes the first time you do it, it doesn't work. So I go back to Andrew. Let's say assignment number 2. Change this to part 2. Click save, and see no error pops up. And if you go back to the file browser, sorry about that. Go to Andrew's folder. You see that part and the lock file is right in there.
So now let's go ahead and create a 2D sketch, which would be creating a 2D representation of something. When we click that, you'll notice that a bunch of planes show up. And by convention, we usually like to start our sketch on the XZ plane. After selecting the XZ plane, you'll notice that a Cartesian plane is created, with this yellow point being the origin, at the coordinates 0, 0. We generally like to start our sketches using the origin. You'll notice up here we have the different shapes that we can use in a 2D sketch, such as a line, a circle, an arc, of which there are 3 options: 3-point, tangent, and center point, and rectangle. Let's go ahead and create a rectangle with the origin as one of the corners. Notice that as we create the rectangle, there are 2 numbers on the side which represent the dimensions for the length and width of the rectangle. You'll notice that one of the numbers is highlighted, and if we type into our keyboard a new number, such as 0.5, and we press tab, you'll notice that the height has been immediately dimensioned to 1/2 of an inch. Let's do the same for the length, except do 1 inch, and press enter. This creates a rectangle that is 1 inch by 1/2 an inch. Now let's press escape so we exit the rectangle mode. If we double click a dimension, we can see that we can edit it. So let's say we want to cut this down to 3/4 of an inch, press enter, the rectangle shortens up. This is editing a dimension. And of course, if we use Control Z on our keyboard, we can undo that, and if we use Control Y, we can redo that. Let's go ahead and click Finish Sketch. And now we have exited the 2D sketch mode. So you'll notice now we have the option to extrude our 2D sketch, which would be converting it into a 3D model. If we click the Extrude button, this window pops up where we can adjust the details of our extrusion. Profile is selecting the surface that we want to extrude. In this case, the 2D sketch has automatically been selected. Distance is how far up we want our 2D sketch to extrude. If we set it to a lower number, such as 0.25 of an inch, you'll notice that the extrusion takes place over a shorter distance. And direction is the direction of how you want the 2D sketch to be extended or extruded. By selecting a different option, the direction is changed. Once we've finished selecting the details of our extrusion, we can click OK, and now we have a box. Now let's go back to the model browser, and you'll notice that an extrusion section pops up. If we right-click Extrusion, then you'll notice that there's an option to edit feature. If we select this, the Extrusion tab pops back up, and we can edit the details of our extrusion. Let's say we want to change the direction of our extrusion or change the distance. And if we click OK, the extrusion is edited. Let's say we want to edit the length or width of the box instead of the height. If we click the plus sign next to the extrusion, you'll notice that our original sketch is still here. Right-click that, and click Edit Sketch, and then we can return to the rectangle that we created earlier. If we edit the dimension again, and let's say we decrease the width down to 0.25, click OK, our rectangle gets smaller, click Finish Sketch, and you'll notice that Autodesk Inventor automatically updates the extruded feature to make our box that is shorter in width. Now let's say we want to adjust our view of the box. You'll notice in the upper right corner there's a view cube, and if we click the Home button, this sends our view into an orthogonal view of the object. Anytime we click the Home button, our camera, so to speak, automatically goes to this view where we can view the front, right, and top side of our part. In addition, we can select different faces of the view cube to view different faces of our part. And if we select these arrows, we get 90-degree rotations of our view. Let's say we select a edge of the view cube. Now we get a view which includes two different faces, and if we select a corner, we get an orthogonal view of our part. Now if I click back home, you'll notice that our view automatically adjusts again. To gain a more custom view of our part, we can use the keyboard and mouse. By using the scroll wheel, we can zoom in and out of our object. By clicking and dragging the middle mouse button, we can pan our view of the object. And by holding Shift and clicking and dragging the middle mouse button, we can rotate our view of the part. We can make our part more complex by adding more extrusions to existing faces on our part. If we right-click one of the faces of our part and select New Sketch, you'll notice that we go back to sketch mode. Let's create a circle. Click and drag, and the number that pops up is the length of the diameter of the circle. Let's type in 0.25 in our keyboard and press Enter. This creates a circle with a diameter of 0.25 of an inch. You'll also notice that in the Sketch tab, there's the Dimension tool. We can use the Dimension tool to also adjust the position of our circle. If we select this face and this point, we get a measurement for how far the circle is away from the top side length. Let's set that to 0.25 to center the circle vertically. If we do the same by selecting the center point and this side, we can get a measurement of how far away the circle is from that side. Set that to 0.75 divided by 2, and now we get 0.375, and our circle is centered in this rectangle. Let's use the line tool to create a triangle. If we click line and we go over here, we click and we drag, notice that two numbers show up, the length of the line and the angle. Let's use 0.125 for our length and use 0 degrees for now. Press Enter, and you'll notice that immediately another line pops up where our first line ended. Let's use 0.125 again but this time for our angle, use 60 degrees. And finally, for our last line, let's just connect it back to our original starting point by clicking. And you'll notice we still have an option to create another line, but since we're done, just hit the escape key to exit the line mode. Now let's go ahead and finish our sketch. You'll notice that on this face we have two shapes. Now let's make our shapes three-dimensional by using the Extrude tool. Select Extrude, and for our profile, we can select these two shapes. You'll notice that when my mouse goes over them, they highlight, and when I click, they extrude. Let's select both shapes, and adjust the extrusion distance to 0.25. Now, after selecting OK, both of these shapes are extruded. Let's create one more sketch on one of the existing faces of our part. Right-click the face of our extruded cylinder, select New Sketch, and let's use the Arc tool. For the Arc tool, there are three options: 3-point, tangent, and center point. For this purpose, let's use 3-point. And the first two selections of our arc are the endpoints of the arc, and the final one adjusts how far out the arc goes. Let's make it concentric with the circle. And finally, let's use line to connect the two endpoints and make a semicircle. You can also accomplish a similar thing with the other arc tool. If we undo, and this time select arc center point, let's use the circle center point as our first selection, the rim as our second selection, and if we want to make a semicircle, we want the third selection to go all the way around and make a 180-degree arc. Finally, let's finish this with a line that cuts the circle in half. And again, we get a semicircle. Let's finish our sketch. Now let's use the Revolve tool, which is next to our Extrude tool. Click that, and you'll notice that in the window, you need to select a profile and an axis. For our profile, let's select the semicircle. For our axis, this is the axis of rotation, which will be revolving our sketch around. Use the line that we created. For our behavior, you'll notice that we have multiple options. We can adjust the angle of our revolution. Let's say we use 30. And you'll notice that the sketch only revolves around the line by 30 degrees. We can also use full, which is an automatic 360-degree rotation. We can use 2, which allows us to adjust when we want a revolution to end. If we select the circle of the cylinder, our revolution only occurs until it hits the other half of the circle. And finally, we can use 2 next, which automatically detects when the revolution should end. Click OK, and you'll notice that we've created a dome by revolving a semicircle around a diameter.